Hi everybody, Richard Travers here again at Artificial Lawyer TV. Today we're doing something of a special episode. We're looking at how Elevate helped with product development for Clifford Chance, in particular in relation to LIBOR. With us to tell us a bit more about it is Dan Katz and Anthony Vigneron. Hi both.
Hello.
Before we go any further, if you could just maybe introduce yourself. Anthony, if you'd like to begin.
Good day. My name is Anthony. I'm responsible for legal technology at Clifford Chance.
I'm Dan Katz. I'm the Vice President of Data Science Innovation at Elevate. And I was the co-founder of LexPredict, which we sold to Elevate in 2018.
Fantastic. Great start. So what we're going to look at really is the problem. We're going to look at the solution, how it panned out, and we're also going to have a little talk about the data science work that is going on inside Clifford Chance. But let's start off with the problem. So Anthony, what was the problem that Clifford Chance wanted to solve?
So really over the last few years and starting all the way back to the end of 2017, after we had enjoyed some of the benefits of the early technologies around due diligence and contract analysis, we also started to see the need to better manage the upcoming pipeline of regulatory change. And that requires different sets of needs and technologies to address what was needed. And here we're talking about large-scale document reviews, and typically in a fairly messy environment with data that needs to be sorted and analyzed before you can come up with maybe even a strategy and then maybe find some solutions to those legal problems. And so we really needed to invest and explore new technologies to be able to do that, which is when we started to investigate products like LexPredict and Contract Suite at the end of 2018. And we obviously had a big pipeline of work coming up that most of the legal sector was engaged with LIBOR reform and changes. And so we started to work on putting together solution patterns that would help us to go and solve a range of problems relating to LIBOR transition projects.
Fantastic. And just for people who are listening who might not be familiar with LIBOR, could you just give us sort of a layman's definition of what we're talking about here, and why a big law firm like Clifford Chance would be involved in it?
Yes, and this is just one example of regulatory change project. In this case, particular variables on contracts needed to change, and I won't go into the details of the LIBOR structure. But in this case, we had to go and find specific bits of information that needed to change and be applied across a range of documents, typically not necessarily directly related documents as well. And so really understanding the data in the source documents so we can analyze and look for what are the legal problems to be dealt with, and then find solutions to those legal problems. In some cases, could be as simple as agreeing a negotiation with a client, or in some cases, redrafting an entire contract on the basis of the new variables. That was really the job in this particular case.
Got you. So it wasn't just a very simple repapering where you had to replace a little bit of language with some new language.
Correct. And in some cases, and actually part of the value of legal service provider is to look for creative solutions. So where you don't need to apply, the brute force solutions to just do some repapering and maybe have a smarter legal strategy. That is also part of our job. So sometimes it does require using technology to just discover the range of issues and then working with lawyers to find the right solution to apply.
Gotcha.
Quite often does not include technology.
No, absolutely. And what keyword there is technology, and we'll come to that in a second. But just again, to give the viewers an idea about what this problem is, how large is the scale here? How many thousands of documents are we looking at? Very, very generally.
Many organizations, banks and corporates were affected by this particular change. Pretty much every large law firm has been engaged in a pipeline of work. Obviously can't disclose exactly how much we've done on this, but you'd expect that all the large law firms were working with their clients across industries to deal with this. Typically for corporate clients, it could include from a few hundreds to a few thousand documents, and for banks could be a few dozens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of documents to be looked at, not necessarily to be dealt with, but to be analyzed at least and processed to look for potential issues. So we're talking fairly large scale.
Fantastic.
There's a pretty big funnel of these documents. If you say, well, look, they don't come pre-labeled as ones that have issues. So you sort of have this funnel of, we got to look through lots of them to find the subset that actually need, say, more detailed involvement from from expert lawyers, but there's just sort of this very large sea of potential financial instruments that are impacted by this, and so you got to imagine you don't want to miss one in the process. So you got to kind of funnel through a lot of them to get to the ones that actually say need human involvement.
And that's a very interesting problem, isn't it? Because, I said you can't just like skim through all of them and give the same result to all of them. You've got to, there'll be gradations of response. And so this is a good opportunity to talk about the tech. So Dan, just talk us through what kind of solution you provided to help with this.
Well, I would just say at a broad level, going back before this project specifically, the notion was we have a toolkit that is extensible to a wide range of problems. And so, there's, as Anthony said, there's generally a series of these regulatory driven exercises and other types of matters where, you don't know exactly what's around the corner, but it has a familiar flavor to it. We need to find some information living in contracts or other types of documents. We need to get that information out and then flag what, some sort of remediation or in light of the information you find. And so not knowing precisely what the problem is in advance, you want, a open source, ideally toolkit that you can go right into the code and change stuff rather than I won't speak for Andy, but then beg the vendor to basically do the changes for you. That's the whole point of having a data science lab is you have data scientists who can do that stuff if they're given source access to the underlying code. I mean, that's a very important factor here.
Well, let's just dig into that just briefly, and again, just to explain to the viewers. So primarily what we're talking about here are natural language processing algorithms. That's if Dan, if you could just explain a bit about how you're utilizing those.
Well, so there's different types of technologies. There's stuff like what would be called pattern matching technology. There's NLP technology. So within that, there's a whole different families of algorithms that are available from sort of word to vec and other types of offshoots of vectorization technologies, BERT, Elmo, what have you. Those and many of and those may or may not be familiar to the audience, but that's kind of the front of the field in NLP. Now, sometimes you don't even need all that. Sometimes you need something simpler. But the point is you have kind of this toolkit available so that you can say, well, what works on this problem? And I got it all on the workbench here. And then you have an expert data scientist who can figure out what works on a problem by problem basis. And rather than this idea that I'm going to prefab the tool for every problem under the sun in advance, that's a good story, but it's not reality. I mean, right, Anthony? That's not been your experience, not been ours either.
No, absolutely, and part of the way we work on our side is first of all to work with our lawyers, looking at the process, looking at the resourcing, and then technology last actually. And even when we look at the technology, as you know, Richard, we've talked previously about, for example, our use of other products like Kira in that space. And there are places for certain tools to do certain activities. And as Dan said, there are also moments where we do need to be a bit more creative and using the right toolkit that we can configure in a very specific scenario for specific clients. And not all clients have the same business questions, for example, even when relating to the LIBOR transition projects. And so being able to cross benefit from the work we've done on researching certain patterns that may be relevant to all clients, but then still being able to answer specific business questions for particular clients, that clearly is not going to get delivered through a single product because the product by nature will address very specific use cases and that's it, nothing else. In this case here, we're talking about a toolkit platform that we can extend actually through open source ourselves to go and go deeper on certain topics if we need to.
Got you. So it's very much, as you were saying, it's very collaborative, and I guess from Elevate side, they were not just sort of providing the tech, but some degree of sort of consultative input as well, as opposed to just saying like, here's a product, off you go, good luck.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the whole point of the open source platform is to drive that collaboration a bit more, not just with Elevate, but also the people in the industry, of course, and certainly for our teams, and as Dan said, our teams of data scientists to see how we can better support and better bring to maybe people who haven't got all the skills to do that kind of analysis, at least prepare the data, prepare some of the reports so they can then operate that by themselves rather than only rely on data scientists.
Gotcha. Well, let's just talk about the process now. So you got together, you figured out that Elevate could help. You knew the problem, you'd spec'd it out. So what happened next? You kind of delivered a ton of documents to Elevate, or Elevate came in and said, right, these are the tools you're going to need, or your data science team said, look, don't worry, we'll look after the whole thing. I mean, how did it go forwards?
No, certainly not. And that was actually one of the reasons for us when we started to have a look back in 2018 for the kind of technology platforms and toolkits we needed. Because when you look at the reality of the client base that we typically deal with, and not just Clifford Chance, but across legal service providers, moving data, which is typically related to financial products or legal products, are certainly not the expectation of our clients to move those documents around that scale. And so being able to work ideally on their premises, if not really moving the strict amount of data that's required, is typically what the clients are expecting. So thinking we're going to, maybe exchange all the documents with other parties is certainly not the expectation of the clients. And part of the reason we needed to have our own data science team, our own toolkit implemented, either on our premises or on our clients' premises, is to be able to stay close to where the data is and for the clients to retain the ownership. One of the other things we were quite committed to do is we don't want to be repeating this every time we have a regulatory change project. And ideally, you would want all our clients to be developing the metadata and maintaining that data sets on their side, because typically those documents are hosted in a variety of product management systems, usually financial services platforms or things like that. So it's really important we actually don't distract the legal operations teams at the client's team to move documents where they shouldn't be. We actually want to help them keep the data in the repository where they should be and help them enhance that data with all the metadata. So from our side, we want to help do the work, give the outputs, and we don't want to be hosting that data. We don't want to be contributing permanently to the manipulation of that data.
Got you. And well, joint question to both you and Dan. I mean, the actual product, if we can just simply call it that did the work, as it were. I mean, who, you might say, who owned it? Who was the product owner of this? Was it Elevate, or was it Clifford Chance, or a bit of both?
I mean, as you would expect on the open source platform, and there are some commercial licensing terms as well around a contract suite, of course, and in particular around the support. But like any of those open source platforms, the moment we take responsibility to host it, is for us to maintain the service. So our teams provide, we've implemented the platforms within our premises or within our clients' premises. And it will be our responsibility for that project to deliver that capability. Clearly, we've been working with the Elevate product development teams in particular to continually enhance the product in the back end. But the functional delivery is absolutely a Clifford Chance responsibility.
Gotcha. And Dan, I mean, in terms of the input that that Elevate made, I mean, how did that evolve? I mean, Anthony just referred to the way that things got updated as you went along. I mean, was it a kind of iterative process where you were constantly tweaking and improving, or I mean, how did it flow through?
Well, I think it's important to understand that this, we made a strategic decision even before we sold the company to Elevate. Was, we wanted to try to be able to support, some of the top firms like a Clifford Chance when they went to say work with a bank, and a bank is going to have a degree of security that is at the very upper end of upper echelon. And so, in the old days, it was all on-prem, like physical servers in the building. Now we're in the private cloud sort of world, but it has a lot of the same properties. And so this idea that it's going to be hosted in a third-party cloud is pretty much a non-starter for a lot of financial institutions. And so we saw that. My colleague in particular, Eric Detterman, saw this as a strategic opportunity, which was, hey, we're going to be the people that will be willing to support that as a kind of, as an offering in the market, because other people, hey, you got to put it in this third-party cloud, and you go to a bank and they say, no, we're not going to do that, and then you're just out of luck, or you have to jump through 1,000 hurdles, and then by the time you jump through those hurdles, the work needs to already be completed. And so this was a strategic choice on our part, and it really aligned well with kind of, I think, Eric was correct that this was a market need. I mean, Eric's worked in financial services before he was in the legal industry, so he had a good feeling for kind of what is a financial institution going to accept and not accept. And so that was kind of our theory of the case. And so we need to be able to deploy the tool into Clifford Chance's environment, and or potentially, if need be, inside the bank's environment, so that the data science team can go right into the instance. The documents never leave the firewall, and do the work right there. So not, in the old days it'd be in a file cabinet, now in the virtual version of that idea, but it never leaves the private cloud, because that's just, for a lot of organizations, this is not, I mean, these are sensitive financial instruments and financial documents, and it's just not gonna, that just isn't gonna fly. So that was really important. That was a very important part of kind of our strategy. And I think it's, it's been validated in this and other work. So that's at least one thing I'd say. I don't know. What else was there was a second?
Well, just also that as the project went along, because I imagine it took several months, as the project went along, how did the product evolve? Did you keep improving it and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, the data science team at Clifford Chance working in tandem, particularly, again, Eric Detterman was the lead from our side, who was our kind of the main lead on this, and then we had other members of our product team assisting along the way. And so we try to provide the level of support that was necessary to fill any gaps. But Clifford Chance was doing the primary work, kind of frontline work. We were there as on a kind of secondary support basis. Obviously, we gave them the toolkit, so that gives them a good degree down the line. I don't know, Anthony, I think that's a pretty fair representation of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Richard, to answer your question around some of the incremental improvements, an example are some of the basic things, which again are the reality when you deal with those kind of projects, and things that you think maybe have been solved a long time ago. But if you think about a lot of those regulatory change projects, they tend to refer to fairly old documents as well. And some of those old documents may not have been OCR'd with great quality. So if you think you're going to be analyzing all of that very easily without too many exceptions, then that probably is not correct. And so we had to iterate a few times on some of the OCR engines, for example, to keep improving and making sure we are generating as few exceptions as possible, because more exceptions means more people, means more cost to our clients. And so really looking for every area of efficiency, so the whole process end to end is as effective as possible. And that's an example of engineering support where we had to keep iterating, and we still are in many areas. Things like different clustering method for looking at how you look at a pool of documents that may or may be relevant to our lawyers to think about the legal strategy. If you can spot huge variations right at the start of the project, having done the analysis very quickly, it is incredibly valuable, because you can then probably refine the legal strategy, refine your plans, maybe refine the expectation with your clients about the amount of work that needs to get done given the variability in the documents. And so being able to tweak those clustering methods, for example, are quite important, and we've certainly iterated on that as well.
Fascinating. I like the economic aspect, as you would expect. The ability to actually get back to the client and say, look, these bits are probably going to cost or take longer. This bit will be able to be done relatively quickly. But look, we're coming towards the end of it now, so let's just kind of wrap up on a couple of key points. So back to Anthony again. I mean, how did it pan out? I mean, you don't want to put Elevate too much on the spot, but did you get what you wanted?
Well, first of all, the most important question is, did the clients get what they wanted from their legal service providers helping? And I would say we've certainly had some success with those kind of solution patterns that we've brought in for those kind of projects. We've also reused, by the way, those kind of solution patterns in other projects already since many times. For example, we've last year we actually published some press release around some work around drafting gender neutral legal documents, and we use again similar techniques to go and do that. So completely different topic, but again good investment in the toolkit, so we can repurpose the toolkit to another problem. So I would say we've certainly invested in developing capabilities that are reusable for our clients, not just on this one project, but also many others. So we're absolutely keen and ready to engage on many other products. From the client's perspective, I would say we've probably haven't achieved everything all of us would want to achieve, which is greater management of the data at source, making sure that all that metadata that's been generated on this type of project has been maintained and secured in the source systems, for example. I think there's still a lot of work to do, and you cover quite well with AL, the contract lifecycle management space and contract obligations. That is clearly an area of investments for all in-house legal teams still. So I think there are some more benefits that to be achieved, but those are not going to be achieved just on the back of one project. It's a long-term strategy.
Absolutely. And back to Dan, just to wrap up. So, I mean, what were your key learnings from this?
Well, I want to say one thing on Anthony's behalf, because he's being a bit too humble. I mean, they did, Clifford Chance won most innovative technology at the Lawyer European Awards 2021 for this work, this LIBOR work. And so, I mean, it is worth noting that it has been recognized. I appreciate he doesn't want to maybe say that because it's too bragging of a thing, but they deserve tremendous credit for this because it was recognized. And I think, that is some indication that that this sort of stood apart. So I just wanted to have at least said that on his behalf, minimally. So, yeah, I mean, listen, this is when I think in all of these things, when you have a product or product business, you're constantly trying to figure out, how do I configure the product to the needs of the market? And so we had some, let's say, some thesis statements about what would be points of differentiation, and then you have to see, does it pan out? And so, I mean, we made a big decision back when we were a standalone company at LexPredict, is we're going to make our stuff open source. Now that was a decision. It was a strategic decision. And the question is, was that a good one? And I think, at least in terms of the needs of Clifford Chance, that was helpful. We're going to be set up to be available on private cloud fairly early. That seemed to be validated. These are the sorts of things. I would say that's on the positive side. On the negative side, I would say we should have invested more time in building a better user interface for our tool. This is, I mean, I want to be somewhat transparent. There's a trade-off point. You can make the engine of your car better, or you can make the body of your car better. And I think the tools in the market sort of toggle between these ideas. There's some tools that are amazing in the demo and are really slick in the UI, but when you actually test the results, it doesn't quite hold up from a pure technical perspective. But man, does it look good in the demo. Now, ours is not going to look great in the demo. I do like our chances in a kind of punching match, especially with a good data science team standing behind it, knowing how to use the toolkit. But I mean, there are those trades. An individual lawyer using a tool that's more for a data scientist historically isn't always going to flounder a little. We're going to have a little bit of difficulty. And so that's something that we needed to work on, which is I think Anthony would agree, make the UI more user friendly for the kind of average user out there. But I mean, these are always the trade-offs in a product company.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dan. And just very, very briefly, last word, Anthony. Overall, a success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really exciting, first of all, to bring different roles into the legal service delivery. I think that is a key trend we'll keep seeing over the next few years. That was quite early stages when we started back in 2018. But that is without doubt the direction of travel. We'll keep seeing more data-driven decision-making in our legal service delivery, and that will require people who can design the process, who can integrate and engineer the technologies. That will require different people to join the teams.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.